So yesterday we got some interesting information from soon-to-be Packers president Ed Policy. He spoke with different Packers reporters, and so I want to share different quotes from Policy about how he plans to operate as the president. Also, he discusses potential contract extensions and sort of what he's looking at when it comes to Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, which is pretty interesting. And so with Mark Murphy, Packers president, turning 70 years old, he has to move on. He has to retire because that's the rule here in Green Bay, which is why the Packers in about 1 month will officially be making Ed Policy the new president in Green Bay. And Policy is a guy who has been in Green Bay for a while. He was the VP and general counsel from 2012 to 2018, and then he was the COO and general counsel from 2018 to the present time. So he does have a history in Green Bay and knows how Mark Murphy liked to operate. First off, from Rob Demovsky, he shares a quote here from Policy who says, all three of them are under multi-year contracts. Policy said of Ball, Gutekunst, and LaFleur. Russ Ball is the VP/Director of Football Operations. And then he continues, none of them are up at the end of this year. We won't be doing anything going into this season. So it does not look like the soon-to-be Packers president will be extending Gutekunst or Matt LaFleur. Also, Russ Ball. They have, at least Gutekunst and LaFleur have 2 years left on their current deal. And then he also adds this, also from Rob Demovsky. Policy says, I'm generally opposed, I'd never say never, but I'm generally opposed to a coach or GM going into the last year of their contract, Policy said. That creates a lot of issues. I think normally you have a pretty good idea of where that relationship is going when you have 2 years left. Not always, but normally. So I think generally speaking, I would avoid lame duck status. It's oftentimes difficult on everybody involved, but there are certain situations that probably call for it. So I would never say never. So on the first hand, we have Policy saying he's not going to be doing anything with those contracts of Gutekunst and LaFleur before 2025 when they have 2 years left. And then he also says he's generally opposed to coaches and GMs going into the final year of their contract, which would mean that there will likely be a decision made next offseason after 2025 for Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst, whether or not Policy decides to keep them around and give them another extension. And so that does mean that it's a pretty big year for Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur. And I think that when you look at what the Packers have done since Gutekunst has come in, overall they've been one of the best teams in the league just on a winning basis. Fourth highest winning percentage in the NFL since Gutekunst took over, shared there by Rob Demovsky. So the Packers have won at a high level. They just have not won a Super Bowl. They had Rodgers for a good period of that time, weren't able to get over the NFC Championship hump, but still, I'd say that if you have a GM come in and you have the fourth highest winning percentage in the NFL, you've done a pretty good job, and so that's why I think Brian Gutekunst is a solid GM. And then you have Matt LaFleur, who also has been very successful since he came into Green Bay in 2019, a year after Gutekunst got hired. LaFleur's 67-33. He has the 13th highest win percentage of all time at 67%. The one area where he has struggled overall has been playoffs. 3-5 in the playoffs, 83rd all-time playoff win percentage at 37.5%, and that could be the same for Brian Gutekunst, nearly the same for Brian Gutekunst. And so that's really the big question is, what is Policy going to be looking at in 2025 when it comes to his decision-making for whether or not he wants to extend Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst? I would assume, if I had to guess right now at this point, that he will end up extending them. I don't think it's a big deal that he's not doing it right now because there's really no need with 2 years left on their deals. I don't think most NFL teams and owners operate in that way by giving out extensions when there's still 2 years left on deals. Now, maybe if the Packers had just won a Super Bowl, that changes because you want to keep that group around more than 2 years, I would assume. And so I would say there's a very, very high chance in my mind that Gutekunst and LaFleur stay around because sure, you could take a risk. Let's say the Packers, make the playoffs, lose their first playoff game again. Maybe you have the discussion, should Matt LaFleur still be here? Is this the best opportunity for the Packers to have success? I would probably say yes, just because you run the risk of things going very south by moving on from someone like LaFleur, who has won at a high level consistently. And so I just think there's a lot of uncertainty by trying to bring someone in and hoping that you can reach that next level. Now, if that happened 2-3 years in a row, maybe you start to question things. And so there is going to be a decision after 2025, but I don't really feel like LaFleur and Gutekunst are like on the hot seat, if you'd say that. I think that they've, been very successful. I think a lot of it comes down to the play of the quarterback. Jordan Love needs to play better football, and if he does, I think there's a good chance this Packers team can go far. So it's something to watch heading into 2025, 2026. But it doesn't sound to me like policy was sitting there from these quotes and really thinking like, they better watch out. We'll see how they do. We'll see if they're going to come back. It didn't really feel like that to me. He also had some very high opinions here of both LaFleur and Gutekunst. And I'll share one of those quotes right here from Matt Schneidman. He shared it in his article. Here it is from Policy. You've got 3 exceptional people doing an exceptional job right now and working well together, Policy said of LaFleur, Gutekunst, and Executive Vice President, Director of Football Operations, Russ Ball. I feel very good about all 3 of those individuals. I love them. I trust them. I respect them. I have terrific relationships, both working and personal, with them. So it sounds to me like they'll probably be back and they'll probably get extensions after this year. That's just my guess, but we will see. And then here's how Ed Policy said he will judge the head coach. So Matt LaFleur, he says, this is from Matt Schneidman here. He says, with head coaches, it starts with wins and losses, but that's a little too simple of an answer for this, Policy said. It can't end with that. At the end of the day, we are here to win football games, so it does start with that, but coaches are fundamentally teachers, I think. They develop people, so you evaluate them on how they're developing people. First, with the players, are they developing players individually? Are players getting better? And then, are they improving as a team? What's the locker room culture like? Is it cohesive? And is it one team or is it a bunch of individuals? And then also here from Matt Schneidman, this is Ed Policy sharing how he will judge the GM, so Brian Gutekunst. Are they aligned? Are they communicating? That will be a very important thing to evaluate both of them on, Policy said. With the GM, again, it's always going to be, are they performing and meeting their goals? Is their behavior and their conduct really aligned with our culture and our values? And then just, are their draft picks and their free agents? It probably takes a little while to determine this. It probably takes at least 3 years or so to really figure this out. But are they building a winning roster? Are they bringing in the right kind of people for our system and for the coach and the right kind of character people? And I would say overall, based on how he grades, head coaches and GMs, I'd say the Packers have done a pretty good job. They need to find more success in the playoffs. They got close a lot with Aaron Rodgers, but I'd say for the most part, they've won at a high level. It's hard to win in the NFL. It's hard to win Super Bowls, but I'd say the Packers are in a good spot right now. And then here we have a discussion from Policy about the structure that the Packers have in place when it comes to, the GM and the head coach both report to the president. So if Policy here wanted to move on from LaFleur in the future, he could fire him if he wanted to, even if the GM didn't necessarily want to. Where in times past, it was the GM who was sort of in control of all the football operations. And here it is from Rob Demovsky. Before 2018, Murphy had continued former President Bob Harlan's practice of hiring the general manager and then letting the GM handle all football decisions, including hiring the coach. Murphy changed that when he hired Gutekunst, in part to allow the first-year GM to focus only on roster building. Policy said he planned to continue that structure to start the beginning of his tenure. We'll do whatever it takes to win football games, Policy said. If that means changing the structure, then we'll change the structure. Just like Mark was not wedded to the structure that he inherited when he came in, I would say I'm not wedded to the structure. We'll do whatever is best for the Packers. So it sounds like he's willing to adapt, but for right now, they're going to keep the same structure where the GM and head coach both report to the president. It's not the coach and Matt LaFleur reporting to Brian Gutekunst. And then here we have an interesting quote here from Policy where he discusses that he will be increasing his time of meetings with football leadership. And this is from Rob Demovsky. Policy said he will increase the amount and the time of formal meetings with football leadership in an effort to facilitate communication between Ball, Gutekunst, and LaFleur. One of the reasons Murphy set up that structure was because there were silos that he said caused breakdowns in communication. Policy says, I see the president's role as it relates to football operations as really selecting football leadership, giving them all the resources they need and supporting them, evaluating them, and then ultimately holding them accountable. Policy said, really, I think it's important to let them do their jobs. These are exceptional people. All three of them, I've got great relationships with them. I'd stay out of their business. I would not meddle in what they do. I would communicate very frequently and openly and directly with them on all things, but certainly no team needs 2 head coaches or 2 GMs. Not a lot of change in the way Mark had done that. So first off, he is going to increase the time the amount and time of formal meetings with football leadership. And so on the one hand, you could think, oh gosh, is he trying to get too involved in the football maneuver or what's going on in the in the football operations? Because it seemed like Mark Murphy was pretty much hands off for a lot of it and allowed them to do their job. And even if he's increasing his time with some of these meetings, it doesn't sound like he's really coming in. At least what he's saying here doesn't sound like he's coming in to really change things too much. It doesn't really sound like he wants to operate that differently from how Mark Murphy operated. We will, of course, see how this changes in the future. But that's something where he is increasing time with the football leadership, which I think, it could be good. It could be bad. It just depends on, you'd assume that better communication between all of them would lead to an organization running that much better. I guess unless he got too involved and LaFleur and Gutekunst felt like he was too involved, which I doubt will be an issue. It doesn't sound like it's going to be too big of a deal. And then a couple of final things here. He says his 3 priorities. This is from Rob Demovsky. Win football games, number 1. It's a great goal to have. Keep the Packers in Green Bay, number 2. Great. And to strengthen our community, number 3. Policy said, I'd say I even apply them in that order of priority. And so really every decision that we make here to do something or not to do something will be based on furthering one or more of those purposes. So pretty self-explanatory there. And then finally, we have here, shared by Richard Ryman of the Green Bay Press-Gazette, another quote from Policy. Policy says, I worked for Mark Murphy for nearly 13 years, Policy said. There are going to be a lot more similarities than differences. We both approach the importance of this job, especially the stewardship nature of this job. We take that very importantly. Obviously, we are a slightly different generation, different communication styles, we're different people, but I don't think there are going to be any real glaring differences. And so I think the big question, when you have a new president coming in is how are they going to operate? At least what he's explaining, it sounds like for the most part, things are going to be pretty similar. And I guess that's something we'll really get to see what happens moving forward. If that's really the case, I guess, actions speak louder than words. So we'll sort of see if that takes place. And it sounds to me from the Packers' decision to bring in Ed Policy, it sounds like they trust him. It looks like, things should continue to run smoothly in Green Bay. I really have no concerns with anything he's said here. It all sounds very reasonable. So those are my thoughts. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe below, and I'll see you guys next time.